discussion has already started elsewhere in Eimuntas Nekrošius theater studio, where we raised the essential question: what is the relationship between state-run institutions of culture and non-profit cultural organizations like this one, like Eimuntas Nekrošius Theater, like other young and ambitious and already established cultural organizations that are actually creating a good name for every country they are functioning in. Surprisingly, we initially understood that similar situation is not just in the Baltic states, but also in Denmark, which is more intriguing, whatsoever. That we will not have this badminton or table tennis saying that our experience is like that, but your experience is completely different, so you will return the ball with certain kind of good practices. I think this is really interesting and this is really challenging to face. It is not easy for the NGOs, it is not easy for non-profit organizations themselves. So as we are sitting in one of the finest culture institutions in Lithuania, which is very recently established, as Audronis Imbrasas was kind to inform us moments ago, it was established 11 or 12 years ago, officially maybe 10 years ago, so it's brand new, but it already has a very, very good reputation, especially among the youngest generation and young generation of art and culture lovers in this country. Probably not just in this country, but visiting audiences and visiting performers also have very positive attitudes about this institution. However, it is not very easy economically for even this institution to survive. We have started already the discussion in Eimuntas Nekrošius Theater. What should be the relationship and what could be the possible transformations of the model that we are having right now in many countries. This is to say, we have fixed budget lines for state institutions, which depend not very heavily on the level of artistic production that they are producing. And we have many newcomers, we have new companies, we have ambitious young theaters, ambitious young dance groups, other artistic enterprises that are establishing international reputations, but still for many years they can only survive on very little funds, on applications to the funds, on unstable, impermanent grants. And should this system be challenged or should it remain as it is? Having historical, traditional continuation of those institutions. I don't know why Musée du Louvre just popped up to my consciousness, because I remember the discussion, a short discussion I had with the director of Musée du Louvre, Monsieur Loiret. I said, do you have terms in the work agreement for a director of Musée du Louvre? He said, I know why you are asking this question. Because in Moscow, the director of Moscow Pushkin Museum is working there since 1946. Wow. I met her. It's a tremendously interesting, wonderful woman. She is 87, I believe. She has 3 mobile phones that she's using every now and then. But she is staying as a director of Pushkin Museum since 1946. And Monsieur Loiret was...
my birth year.
Yes. So, in culture we have respected traditions, we have things that are not changing for years and for decades, and we have these new challenges, people that are creating dynamism to the field, that are traveling abroad, that are going to the festivals, that are being the true ambassadors of the country. But when they are coming back, there is not much left to eat, and sometimes even the spaces are really cold. So if I may formulate the intrigue, if I may challenge you like this, it would be great if we could have a further discussion. as we are not only having ministers and people from the ministries, we are having people from national institutions, we have people from non-governmental art organizations, we have academics, we have researchers. So I think discussion is really could be saturated with different attitudes and economical, social, cultural, political, historical attitudes, among others. I think we still have quite a lot of time. Now it's 5 minutes past 6. I think we have to leave these premises like 10 or 5 minutes to 7. So it's more than academic hour. I'm still thinking in academic terms, as my background is in academia. So we have 45 minutes plus to discuss this issue. And I'm really looking forward to the truth with capital T to emerge at the end of the discussion.
Just point the finger. Just tell us who's expected to start.
Okay.
Should I start?
Please start. You were asking those questions to Eimuntas Nekrošius, theater director. So please, your comments.
Yeah. No, but I just raised the question when we saw the theater space just recently, just 2 hours ago, about what is the big cultural agenda here, and out of that came a discussion about this balance between the new and the old institutions. And what was interesting was that when you told your story, I could totally mirror my own experience, even if the context is very different. And the resources which is on the table in Denmark is maybe much larger, so to speak. But still, there's this very interesting political dilemma between the old guys and the newcomers. And so how do we really, as politicians, through our priorities, create a dynamic balance between tradition and history and quality, security, etc., which the state institution has to play that role. On the other hand, innovation, experimentation, new ideas, new business models on the other hand. And it's a very, very delicate balance to create, but it's an ongoing struggle. And that it was just interesting to hear your comments, because hey, you're talking about my reality, but you are talking about your own reality. So that was one thing which was inspiring for me to hear. Another thing which I think sets the agenda in Denmark these days, and I think maybe I'm curious to hear if that's also your situation, because there are two main drivers right now which provoke and channels all our political issues on the cultural field in Denmark, and through that our institutions and our organization. And it's internationalization and it's digitalization. Music was the first artistic field who hit the digital wall, so to speak, and where a lot of the old structures, old record companies, etc., was really struggling for their own domain. And the music industry has come through this digital wall, and now we see new streaming services as Spotify and Wimp in Denmark, and the same situation is going on now with the movie business, and HBO is coming to Denmark, and Netflix, as you know about, and now the literary scene is facing the same channels, which in a way totally reorganize the way we organize our cultural sector. And I think that's a very, very tough issue and a tough question. How do we secure the intellectual rights for our artists. How do we see the food chain, so to speak, business-wise? We'll see old companies die, new coming up, and it will also question the state funding. How should we make our priorities? So, just to end this little introduction, because there are so many interesting questions on the table, yes. But I could really mirror my own political reality through what you were talking about, the new and the old. How do we do it? How can we change the old institution? How can we make the old institution more playful and innovative, at the same time support new voices? And how do we face? How do our cultural communities handle these two main drivers, digitalization and internationalization, which provoke a lot of tough issues?
Well, sorry, I have a question. Do you mean internationalization like export?
Yes, export, and also that for example, the Danish audience, the Danes are traveling everywhere, see all kinds of stuff, and they compare quality. Okay. So if you produce a Danish movie, it should at least be as good as a German movie or a UK movie. So it pushes the quality discussion, and people don't expect low quality anymore.
Which is good.
Which is good, but and through that, of course, it also opens up for a new kind of cooperation between the artistic communities and environments and institutions in Denmark with good people abroad or in Europe, around Europe.
Thank
you. Yeah. Digital paradise. This is what almost majority of us are looking forward to.
But just one little more comment, and then I'm closing down. Is that what is so interesting, seen from my perspective, is that we are in a, I don't know the English term, but mellemtid, hvad hedder det?
Describe situation.
No, but it's a kind of a, we're moving from a reality which we were familiar with, and moving to something we don't know yet. So we are in between. We're in a digital in between reality, where everything is moving. First of all, in different speed and in different directions, which means that as a politician, sometimes it's very, very difficult to make the right choices. Either what kind of IT programs should we focus on? What structures do we think will be the right one in the future? Would the internet radio system taking over the old radio system, etc.? So we are in a very interesting, in a digital in-between period, where everything is up in the air, and in that situation you have to postpone the decision and at the same time allow a lot of experimentation, because you really don't know, you don't have the knowledge on the table, enough knowledge on the table to maybe make the right political decision. So you have to support experimentation and maybe move the decision curve. And that's a tough situation to be in as a politician, because everyone wants to expect that you have the answers right now.
And money.
And money.
Maybe priests could provide that.
Yeah.
Yes. Robert, it is exactly what we've been talking about in Essen, what Minister has just said, these digital issues. Could you please quickly comment on that? What's your view from New York perspective?
Let me tell a quick story. I live in Berlin now, and I ran into my neighbor who had just bought Mad Men on DVD, the TV show. And he was telling me how he really likes to watch US TV shows. And how come the US TV shows got so smart in the past 10 years and all the movies got so dumb? And when you think about it, it's true. In the 70s, TV was for kids. Movies were for adults. Now it seems like in the US, at least, movies are for kids. TV is for adults. You've got Mad Men, Sopranos, Breaking Bad. These are very sophisticated, serialized dramas with the complexity of novels. And one of the things I told him was that the business of television changed in a way that supported that. If you think about TV in the 70s, I'm not sure how much TV of our horrible 70s TV we inflicted on different countries, but you had Mr. Ed, which was a show about a talking horse, you had the Brady Bunch, Gilligan's Island, terrible stuff, because television was funded only by advertising. It had to be very popular. When cable came around, you could charge for television. You could get away with a smaller audience. So all of a sudden you expanded the possibilities of programming. And what I think was great is that you can sell Mad Men on DVD in Germany. You can sell any show on HBO in Denmark, on Netflix in Sweden. But all of that is really, you need copyright to do that. However you sell it, whether you sell it on DVD or streaming or downloads or on cable, you need to be able to invest and recoup your investment. And I think the exciting part is that you can do that in lots of different ways. You know, in the US we have this show, The Killing, that's based on a Danish show. I'll spare you from my pronunciation. You get money from that, you get positive feedback from that. If you take away copyright, I don't think you would have that anymore. So there's a tremendous opportunity, but I think there's also a tremendous risk of losing some of that vitality. Because what you see on YouTube, which is funded just by advertising, I don't think it's as, some of it has a lot of vitality, but I don't think it's as compelling or mature or as artistic.
So should the state money step in the situation and grant some seriousness or grant some artistic level to the things that just funded by adverts?
I think that, yes, but I think the other thing the state can do is also make sure the policy supports, you want to support the market, but you want to support the market with money, but you also want to support the market with laws and policies that let the market work. Like, you might want to invest, but you also might want to make sure that when private companies invest, that they can get their money, they can have some confidence that they'll get their money back. How much you enforce the law is probably not a culture minister, it's probably a justice minister, but I think it's important not only where you spend your money, but how you protect the investments of others, because that lets them add to what you do. Hopefully not compete with you, but it really adds to what you do, and then you get into the situation where rather than spending so much money on everything, you're letting the market do what it does best. Because the market does some things very well, and then you can do what only the government can do, because there are things that the market just doesn't do a good job of. Classical music, for instance, or jazz, harder to fund through the market, so you can then focus on that, which I think is also very important.
Classical music makes me think of National Philharmonic Society.
Yes.
So you are one of those really respected and really having a high-level content institutions that are by tradition, having this national status and having some institutions under your shelter, like chamber orchestra, like national orchestra, like any others. So what are your ideas? This situation in flux, as mentioned by Uffe Elbækas, or as we call it for the last 20 years, culture in transition. We always call Lithuania as a culture in transition, and it never stops to be. So what does transition mean for really classical, really respected institutions like you are heading now?
In Lithuania it's very difficult because all the major events and phenomena happen only in the capital city, in Vilnius, and then we export to other cities in Lithuania. Although we are 72nd season, which just started, but in a way it is also constantly changing institution. But Robert, you mentioned really a very important thing, that classical music is kind of really long-term training and long-term tradition. So if we talk about, let's say, symphony orchestra, National Symphony Orchestra, Lithuanian Chamber Orchestra, it takes minimum 10-20 years to build the orchestra. And if we want to have a brand of the orchestra, it takes 50 years. So it's not just, you know, a coincidence that all those big names like Concertgebouw and operas and other, they have at least 50 to 100 years of history and tradition. And of course, all the content, I think, should change inside these brand institutions. These brands, they are also very important for the culture economy. Because we seek for those names. If we go to other countries and cities, we go, I will go to Vienna myself, so for the music field, it's Konzerthaus, Musikverein, Wiener Staatsoper, whatever. I want to see what is happening there in these flagman institutions. So it's the same for Lithuania. At least several institutions have already established their brands. Not just orchestras, but the festivals. And like Vilnius Festival, it is very difficult now to fill in with the top content, with the global quality content because of the funds. However, we have such a loyal audience during the 16 years of existence of Vilnius Festival that they more or less they motivate us to keep up and to go with the new trends and to seek for a little bit cheaper productions, but still very high quality, or more cooperation with the neighboring countries, especially like Latvia, Estonia, and Poland, which we do every year. And I think this tradition, of course, shouldn't stop the changes, and there should be more of maybe of a rotation. Although the musicians rotate within the orchestras, but there should be more of rotation even of these music groups that are within the classical music field. And in this big institution, as the National Philharmonic is, I'm the only person which is compulsory rotated every 5 years. And there are many, let's say, chief conductors who are there for 48 years already. So this is maybe the question that we have to discuss, and we have to change and to follow global perspective and global market ideas.
I'm noting the rotation of the conductors. Yes. Which is, we were more focusing on museums.
And I just wanted to comment on media and copyright, and it is really kind of a joke, but it's a phenomena of little countries, and our country became a global player just, let's say, 8 years ago when we entered European Union. More or less, we could access to the information, we could access to the tools that global culture players are using. And sometimes it's even good that we didn't have a rich music industry or rich and powerful film industry. So maybe we can jump over this kind of a problem, let's say, and to step in like the IT players. They step in immediately the newer trends. So that's my comment.
Okay.
Yes, Leonidas, you are not only one of the brightest minds in this country, but you're also a musician yourself, and I remember from our previous discussions that you were quite puzzled that in some, for example, American shows you would have Madonna and very respected classical music players in one show. So are we witnessing this melting down of the borders, and for the economic reasons we have to make some steps that we never imagined before?
For various reasons, I think it's a very good question, because honestly, I think that highbrow can coexist with pop culture, which is happening nowadays. And I would be tempted, as a humanist, as a professor, prior to my election, I was one, so I would be tempted to say that it's not for the benefit of the highbrow, to compromise, just to be in the same situation or shoes with pop culture. But in fact, pop culture can do many favors to classical music, classical culture, popularizing, spreading a good note, spreading a good word, sending a very good message. So it's a paradoxical age. And I have to say that sometimes it's very good to just to capitalize on this ability somehow, just to put them together. But honestly, listening to you and to your very thoughtful and very interesting reflections, I thought that I just found myself thinking about a broad horizon. I think that one of the most important and one of the most precious commodities, or the most precious properties of culture, and intellectual culture especially, is the ability to provide a wider horizon, bridging some faculties of creativity. Because in fact, what's happening now, I guess, is that when politicians try to assess culture, education, they don't have a wider horizon. They think that they have the political will, they have the legitimacy, they have the right to change, to reform, but in fact, you have to have a concept. You should have a perspective prior you start doing something. Because it reminds me of Brücher's situation, the blind leading the blind. How do we know that we know what is going to happen? How do we know that we reform for the better? How do we know that we have the answer without consulting artists themselves, without consulting academics or people of art? And it's a misconception, although I am in politics now and I speak as an MEP, but in fact, an academic prevails in my person in this situation, and that's why I speak my mind, saying that it's very important not to remember the fact, ladies and gentlemen, that politics is not about the standard of judgment. Politics is about the will, about practical priorities, about legitimacy, but the standard of judgment, the criteria, they are in culture. They are not in politics. That's why, in order to have criteria, we have to stick to the situation. We have to put those segments together. Culture doesn't work without politics when it comes to social and cultural change. But the same happens to politics. It could be blind without culture. It could pretend that they could lead and to provide the answer. In fact, it's a self-deception. In most cases, politicians rely on some sort of, global logic. There is none. There is no global logic as such. We have many segments of contemporary life, and many people desperately try to debate them, artists, philosophers, sociologists, so nobody knows the answer. That's why we are in flux. We have to debate, we have to change our opinions, we have to engage, and that's why I think that sometimes, I just found myself thinking about my favorite writer, Isaac Bashevis Singer, who put it once that, in fact, sometimes events are wiser than human beings. The same happens to culture and politics. I think that sometimes cultural creations and processes are wiser than politicians who try to be in control. It's a self-deception and delusion. Let's talk to each other. I think that this seminar is exactly what should be done in the coming years. What is really precious about culture and politics now is the ability to bridge some faculties that were separated. In our case, in Lithuania, or in the countries of very similar fate in East and Central Europe, it's been the most brutal version of modernity, an extremely radical, brutal version of modernity with much technocracy, with disdain for the humanities, with contempt for arts, save for some instrumentalized versions of opera or ballet for the sake of glory of, Soviet culture, something like that. But in fact, what is very important to bridge what has been separated. We live in the world when it is easier to split and separate than to bridge. And an attempt of culture is to bridge. So, and I would think that this action, trying to improvise, trying to find an answer, an error and trial with good benevolent intentions and the ability to bridge is exactly what we need now.
Thank you, Professor. Now I'm immediately thinking about three people, Mr. Filipka and Ragnar Seed and Professor Sako. I don't know which one of them to provoke first. Maybe Mr. Philip.
But the discussion is about redefining the mission of the Ministry of Culture. And maybe because we are at a time where we're experimenting, we don't know where we are going. But we know that we need the skills and competence of artists as much as scientists and engineers to figure out what is coming up. Maybe the mission of Ministry of Culture has to change because we are still in the Ministry of Culture is managing money of institutions, whereas maybe we should no longer talk about institutions but empowering some people or empowering research and development in the artistic field. And this may mean that the Ministry of Culture maybe has a different position in the government because it can influence education policy, because it can influence innovation policy, because it can influence enterprise policy, because it is managing competence that the society needs today. We have an opportunity, and the opportunity is this change of the world, digitization, internationalization. What do we do with our local culture, with our small languages in an international melting pot? What do we do with the necessity to be more creative and innovative because our industries are moving away to cheaper locations? And that we have extraordinary assets in Europe because we have a so diverse culture, but we are not aware of those assets. But countries outside of Europe are aware of those assets and looking into Europe as a way of managing creativity, innovation. When you take the Chinese or the Latin Americans, we have something there, but we are not conscious of these assets. So maybe we should review, or do a catalog of our assets in a cultural field and see how those assets actually contribute to innovation or to contribute to address the social problems, the economic problems of Europe. So this, for me, would mean like reviewing the mission of the Ministry of Culture and empowering the Ministry of Culture in a wider area.
Yes, thank you.
Now, this discussion is incredibly interesting. I have very quickly 3 points. The first one, I read Robert's excellent book, and I think that on that particular dimension, he makes very thoughtful and I think absolutely sensible remarks. The point is that, as the Danish Minister of Culture was saying, we are in the middle of a transition, and this transition is changing very quickly the panorama. In which sense? I understand that, for example, the case of let's say, the United States, that have developed their cultural industry in a context in which the copyright system was very well enforced, then this is in some sense necessary to the permanence of the system. But what about the countries that are emerging now, that they are developing their cultural and creative industry when the copyright system is in question? I just make an example that I know increasingly well because it's spectacularly interesting, which is South Korea. South Korea is becoming one of the world leaders in the production of contents, for example, in TV dramas. South Korea now are the undisputed leader in the East Asian quadrant. And for example, the case of South Korea, they are developing totally different business models that are in some sense cross-sector, in which they not only are not particularly interested in enforcing copyright, but in some sense they are encouraging the violation of the copyright. Just to make an example, the TV series there are in Korean, and they often have to do with Korean matters, but at the same time they are becoming, for a lot of different reasons that I don't have the time to explain here, perhaps they are becoming increasingly popular because this narrative becomes very, very interesting for the Chinese, for the Singaporean, and so on and so forth, Indonesian and so on. So what they are doing is basically encouraging the copying, the downloading, the circulation of this product, because by doing so, they are creating a common cultural space that is extremely important for them to establish as an emerging cultural platform. And the fact that they don't have, a return on this specific activity, for them is not particularly important. It's much more important that this creates a common space, because the dimension, for example, just of the TV public in these emerging markets is so huge that this is more than enough to develop the industry. On the other hand, there are also some aspects that are telling. In this moment, for example, on YouTube, by far the most liked and viewed video is a piece of work by a Korean singer called Psy and titled Gangnam Style. It's an entirely crazy thing, but it has reached, I mean, it was posted on July 15 and is getting closer to 300 million single viewers. The first thing that Psy did in the face of this absolutely unexpected success was to give up any kind of copyright restriction or diffusion of the piece. Everything could, I mean, download it, mix it, do whatever they wanted with this. And this contributed substantially. Just because I'm not saying that, I mean, this proves anything about whether or not copyright is right. This means that industries that are developing today in the new framework are adapting to this framework. They are developing new models. So perhaps we should be more careful about this, because I think they have a lot to teach to us. The second thing, and I would like to take up what Philip was saying, I'm working increasingly more in China. And from China, for example, we have a very clear signal. They, of course, are going to make an enormous investment in the next 10 years in the development of cultural and creative industry. It's several times the Italian GDP, just to give you an idea. But at the same time, interestingly, they don't look at the United States, for example, for the model to develop this kind of system. They look at Europe because they understand that their contents, in some sense, have to link back to their historical and cultural heritage, which in their case means rediscovering Confucianism, rediscovering Taoism, not necessarily as a nostalgic operation, but in some sense to connect with their own history and identity. By the way, that was the Korean did, and they learned from the Korean. So what's the point? Europe, in this sense, is the model. They look at Europe as the reference model for doing this. But at the same time, how is Europe equipped to answer to this kind of opportunity? What kind of strategy do we have to coordinate, to take advantage, I think, of this unique possibility to also have not only open new space for our cultural production, but in some sense to have a say in what will probably be the most important development of the cultural productive sector in centuries. We have no strategy. This is something that I think should be tackled very, very carefully. And very, very quickly, the last 30-second statement. We should consider that culture is changing completely its role in the current context with respect to the traditional cultural industry framework. Culture is not simply an entertainment anymore. It's entering the daily fabric of the life of people. It infiltrates so many different dimensions. So we cannot simply consider the entertainment management dimension as the only relevant one. The more we understand the structural interdependencies between culture and welfare, culture and innovation, culture and social cohesion, the more we understand how can we effectively act on this. But especially in Europe, I think this is very important.
I have done so many things for more than 20 years in culture and education and science.
At least give us your name.
Anyway, so I quite like the idea as the Danish minister started about this limbo state in which we all live today. And that is true, I agree, that there were so many unpredictable things, unexpected things that have happened in a very short period of time. Remember September the 11th, nobody ever believed that something like this can happen. Now, all the political elections in Europe, in many countries, including Lithuania, nobody expected people to be elected, the personalities that were elected. So the thing is that we really are in the period of not transition, because transition is from something we know to somewhere we know. But we don't know where we are transiting to. And I think it is also evident in the field of academic world, like narrative is dead. We hear it more and more often, and therefore everybody should study the sciences, R&D. So, and in this limbo state, in this flux state, we have institutions that have been established years and years ago. And they were established for the specific purposes that I believe are no longer valid. So there were institutions like NATO, we all know why it was, and there were enemies that we all knew, and they are no longer enemies. Nobody knows who's who are our enemies. So in a way, I believe that those institutions, including national cultural institutions, established many years ago for those obvious goals that are no longer valid, they continue functioning because we don't know. So perhaps your idea of experimenting, allowing to experiment. And in the contemporary art and culture is always, especially contemporary art, is the documenting what is happening in the world and trying to summarize and draw conclusions. And I more and more often notice the notion of unlearning. Everything that we have learned so far is no longer useful. So we should unlearn, go back to some stage where we sort of try to explain and line up things, and maybe that is the answer, that there is no answer, and not only politicians, scientists can also are not able to give any answer today. So those institutions perhaps should also, and rotation, yes, rotation, but not only the heads of the institutions, I believe, but also at all the levels of the institutions, rotations may be a solution.
Thank you.
Well, it's a slippery slope with rotations in a country which is only 3 million people.
Not anymore.
Not anymore, less than that, yes. So we've been not hearing
We
from...
have to hear our colleagues.
Yes. This is not to say that this, how to say, transition of roles in this discussion has any logics or any sequence, but please communicate.
I
yes,
think the
your
microphone
ideas.
is on
Yes.
that box, yes.
Yes, there are bugs everywhere.
Well, I
We're
think
wired.
Yes, we are wired.
I'd like to continue with the idea of exchanging views on institutions. Well, to some extent I can agree to your point that there are many institutions whose aim and necessity is not so valid anymore. I might think differently of NATO, but this is a different story. But it's true that the Western society has developed its cultural institutions for hundreds of years already, and all the creativity which has developed culture in this civilization has been boxed into those institutions. Whether they are museums or big opera houses or philharmonic societies or theatres, etc., etc. So if you wanted to be a creative person 30 years ago and wanted to stage a TV show, you had to approach a big broadcasting company. Smaller ones couldn't do it because they didn't have the funds and they couldn't distribute those works to the whole world. Now what you need is a computer. You go to the store, you plug the computer in and you become a publisher. And you can set up a blog which can be read by millions of people. The only thing is how to get their attention to that blog. And you can be a broadcaster. You have good ideas of setting up a network radio station on an internet. Please do. You can attract thousands and thousands of people, or why not millions. To set up a TV company is extremely easy. No problem at all. So the means of distribution of creativity have tremendously changed with the digitalization. So whether we should think that the creativity should be developed into those existing boxes, so I don't believe in that. So I think we should think in a very different way here. Concerning copyrights, and I think this is the main issue now, so there will be a change of paradigm, but into which direction? What happened with this famous ACTA treaty, which didn't pay any attention, for example, in Germany and many other Western countries, became a huge issue in some of the Eastern European countries. where people occasionally think that arts is for free. That comes from the communist thinking. Arts is for free. So stealing material from internet or hacking into someone's computer is not a crime. This is disturbing. This is extremely disturbing thinking. So if that spreads, and it's spreading now, we have a pirate party in Sweden.
Germany also is.
Germany, and a powerful party, and most probably will be represented in the next Bundestag. But the Swedish pirate party went into the European Parliament. The piracy movement here is openly saying that copyrights are from evil, and the whole logic should be changed. I don't know what that leads, and this could be one of the discussions what we can hold here as well. If those people who say that the copyrights have lived their time, they should also say what they can place inside of that. So I don't have an answer to that. And if creative people can't support themselves anymore by market economy means, that means tremendous pressure on governments to have more and more funding and different foundations to pay annual or monthly salaries to creative people, and let the others benefit from those to have it distributed by means of digital communications and make profit. So this is to be the main debate during the next 5 years. And the ministers of culture should play an active role in that, not only to leave that to ministers of justice. I hope I didn't say that.
I like hearing that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't know, different countries have different areas of authority, but I certainly would support that.
But could I pick up, just make one little reflection? Okay, sorry.
Let me, a colleague was about to say, and then of course you have your comment. As we are approaching the time limit, that we will have to move to yet another interesting, exciting institution. Please, Žaneta.
Thank you. Latvia, less than 2 million. And you're talking here about very global ideas, and maybe we could start to talk about basic needs. And we have the same stories that you have in Lithuania, budget cutting. Maybe you know that Latvia was the leader in the crisis, minus 20% GDP. And we had the same story. What we did, we create a team from 20 finance directors from the well-known companies, and they took the budget of the Latvia and started to go through basic needs. And you know that culture is not the basic need in Latvia too. And why? And I have an answer why. Because culture has an interesting brand, spending industry, dotation, not investment. And question is how to change this brand from spending industry to, creative industry. And I have idea. I understand that I am coming from business field, and maybe this idea is not good for persons from the culture. Maybe we could start to use economical terms, strategy for next 5 years, with result, export, investment, how we could be a part of economical growth, how we could help to state to receive some goals and results. And I understand that maybe profit from the culture is not the money. Maybe profit is identity, what is very, very important for the state. Maybe result is some investment and so on. And we need this research, how to use these specific cultural results and change this brand from spending industry to creative industry. Thank you.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, but thanks for that reflection. Thank you. And actually, I just wanted to say two things. One thing is that it's very unique experience that we're sitting here as colleagues and have time to listen to each other. It's really great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that, and thanks for the invitation. That's a privilege. It's a privilege, and I know that you're stepping out of the politics.
Oh, for a while, I'm coming back for sure.
Okay. Anyway, but the reason why I just wanted to make a little feedback was your question about intellectual rights. And again, that's a question which of course is a really hot question for, I think, most ministers for culture right now in Europe. And there's been different strategies. How should we approach illegal downloads of music, film, etc., etc.? And it has been also a discussion going on in Denmark, how should we do it? And for a certain period we were very close to adapt a more hard policy strategy like what is happening in France up to now, saying that have you been downloading illegally 3 times, your internet access would be cut. So we've been very close to actually presenting a strategy or a reform in the Danish Parliament, which a bit looked like the French strategy.
I had a very, very short answer. If we start to think in these economical terms, that if we are paying for gas, electricity and food, why we do not pay for music?
No, but yeah, I totally agree. But what is interesting is that that hardline strategy is changing right now. In Denmark we have decided that we're not going to adapt the French model. Our focus would be to support new legal services, because what is happening, for example, when it comes to Spotify, you can see a direct link. If the legal services is there, actually the young people want to use the legal services if it's cheap and it's easy. I had a talk with our French colleague, the new Minister for Culture in France, and she told me that the hardline policy in France has been the wrong alley, because they have been sending out more than 1 million letters to French citizens saying you are downloading illegally, blah blah blah. They have spent more than I can't remember the figures, but in Danish crowns it's 90 million Danish crowns, that's around 10 million euros or so, with no success. So we changed our strategy, the Commission is changing the strategy, France are changing the strategy from a very hardline policy to focusing on legal services, new legal business models. And I think that's interesting. So how do we, all these young kids who think that information should be free, if we can't bridge their needs and way to understand the world, we'll be the losers, because they're the future. So how do we meet this new reality and at the same time protect intellectual rights? It's a damn tough question.
Please, your comment, please.
Thank you.
The microphone.
Hello, my name is Gada Debshita and I'm representing Nordic Baltic Dance network called Kedia, as well as independent creators of performing arts here. And the comment was to the business dictionary in arts, because there are researches that show that €1 invested into culture gets back 3 or up to 4 euros. So that's already not spending, that's the investment. And we are proving it, which with each international event that we do. The budget gets that even though the government invested, but actually by the end of the day they got more money by taxes and people spending money in this country. So we are in the business together, and we are not the spenders. We are the ones that help to earn, actually.
Sorry, country-wise, Finland should add some remarks. As many countries at the Baltics, we're looking at Finland as sort of teacher in many aspects in many areas. So.
Many thoughts are in my head because such interesting notes you have done. One thing I wanted to say, because we have also been discussing about old culture institutions and new free groups and so on. But I think, because there was a book, it was written about 4 years ago, and the name of the book was Walls or Content. And the writers wanted to say that all the money the government is giving as state subsidies to old institutions goes to walls, but the content is in the free groups. But I actually don't agree about that, because I think the most important thing for culture is quality, the quality of content. And also old institutions can have very, very high quality. For instance, our National Finnish Theatre, it had its 140 years anniversary last month. And it is so exciting theatre just now. New writers want to write to that theatre. There are very talented young actors, and they want to go to that theatre. So I would like to get some kind of systematic approach how to be sure that the money is going to high quality, because that is the thing, not walls or free groups or old theatres or museums or orchestras, but the quality, whether it's in northern part of Finland or southern part, but the quality is number one. And I agree very, very deeply with that copyright issue, because it's the work to create content, and you have to be paid of that work. And if we don't pay, and if the actors and artists don't get the salary of their work, so we don't have any content anymore in our lands. So how to create creativity? It should be something. It should be paid, and so we could get content and then to distribute it and to export it to other countries, because we have here very, very deep cultural heritage. We have roots left, and so we have the basic things. We have education system, music school, whatever. But to provide content and high quality content, that is what I wanted to say.
Actually, I want to come back to the first point that you made, the division between the classical culture, the role of institutions and these free and non-governmental issues. But actually, just before that, I would say also that the points made regarding intellectual property, they're absolutely right, and I can't agree more with the Danish minister. In Estonia, probably the same situation in Latvia, Lithuania. If I want to see Mad Men, I can't. I mean, there's no Netflix, so there's no Spotify access for our people here. It was just recently opened the iTunes store for us. So you're absolutely right. Everybody looks at the statistics, how much we're downloading, but you know the other statistics of what are the opportunities for actually paying, there's very little. And even though the iTunes was opened for us, it's still very limited content, especially on the films and the TV series. So we cannot do that. And then the question is if it's justified downloading illegally or not. But just coming back to where we started from, I think still the stereotypic understanding is that, that there's a very clear division between the classic culture and the new contemporary culture. There's a institutionalized culture and a non-institutional culture. And actually, I think it's a very old-fashioned way of looking at things. Just go to institutions. And I think our institutions, some of the productions of operas or projects in the theatres, the classical theatres with the walls, are doing fantastic innovation. They have been mixing, cross-sectorial projects, cross-disciplines, new media, etc. And if you go to the free culture, if you go to the new modern way of doing culture, you see a lot of very low quality, short-lived projects. So you get it both sides. And I think that one of the way of going further is with the policies is to really to go away from this guaranteed sums or guaranteed position for the state institutions. Nothing is granted. If you want to be treated, you should be treated equally. In our culture policy already from 98, it is very clearly stated that the culture should be funded regardless of your institutional status, whether you're a state institution or not state institution. Our minister was mentioning the remodification of the theatre policy in Estonia, and that's one of the ideas. That it's the fact that whether the government gives subsidy or funding for the theatre has nothing, or should not be nothing to do with the fact whether you're state institution, state-founded foundation or not. If for the many years in a row the quality of your production is low, then the decision is being given in the hands of professionals, not politicians or not the officials. It's professionals, and if the professionals come to the minister for second or the third year in a row saying the artistic content of this theatre, your own theatre, is not good enough, then the minister should start closing procedures. So, I mean, if that, yeah. What on the exactly, and on the other hand, what we are trying to do is this 3-year projects. From next year, Estonia is going to give theatres and also some of the biggest festivals 3-year contracts instead of 1-year contract. And not only state, all the institutions that kind of pass this artistic program. And the idea there is that there's a bit hectic funding decisions. The ministers change, the government change, the priorities change, and it's really difficult to make more than 2 or 3 year plans. The budget, especially during the cuts, you don't really know what can you rely on next year or 3rd year or 5th year. So what we try to do is to connect the period of artistic director in a theatre with this funding period. So you come with your idea, with your vision, you present it, and the government then says, if this is good enough, then you can be more or less stable, and then you have a 3-year period to prove. And if you do not prove, if you fail, then others will come. So that was just maybe some suggestions on some of these dilemmas, and at least in Estonia, this has been more or less accepted without a big public scandal or a discussion.
Incredible.
Very two small remarks, and one to be controversial with our ministries here today. The first one is related to what Ragnar just said earlier, that we rely on iTunes and Netflix to have access to content. And so I'm a bit worried about the fact that somebody in Los Angeles deciding what kind of content we get in Europe. And I think there has been a weakness on European policy part to actually make the most of our local assets for international distribution. First point. The second point, to be controversial, you were asking initially, are the Ministry of Culture listening to policy? I would say that, and I will be bold, I will say, I see that there is a lot of movement at city level and at regional level, and that the Ministry of Culture are completely bypassed. And there is a risk that actually policies of experimenting, trying, supporting, come from those places, and that the Ministry of Culture will be limited to manage the large institutions. So, yeah.
Yes. So thank you very much. It's been tremendous to listen to all of you. I hope we have rehearsed tomorrow's discussion in a larger space. You're more than welcome, everyone, to join us tomorrow. And now we move. I see Marius Urbanavičius, the director of Design Innovation Center, is already waiting for us to grab us and to take us to the next venue. Yes. So let's go.